to the podcast, everybody. Episode number 5 of Adapting to Change. I'm here with co-host Alan. Unfortunately, it is just me and you today, Al. Nick couldn't be with us today due to some unforeseen personal circumstances. However, he will be back with us for episode 6. So for any Nick haters out there, bask in the glory of his absence today. So just me and you today, Al. Although I say just me and you, Al, that's a nice little segue for us to introduce Carl to the podcast. Carl, welcome along. Thank you for coming up and joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
No problem at all. How long did it take you to get up here?
It's about 3 hours.
3 hours. 3 hours. So that's a power of the Adept podcast. So before we kind of do a bit of a deep dive into who you are, what you've done within the industry, we'll start off with a few light-hearted bits just so that we get to know you a little bit better and the audience get to know you a bit better. So first and foremost, favourite holiday destination?
Well, it's got to be the Alps. Yeah, for winter sports, skiing all day long.
Very good. How long have you been skiing for?
Oh, I've been skiing for a few years now. One of my specialisms when I was in the military was mountaineering. So I know I'm slightly portly now, but you know, fat bear still a bear. So I really do enjoy the winter environment. Canada's probably my favourite place in the whole world. It's got the best ice in the world all day long. But for skiing and accessibility for me, it's probably the Alps.
Switzerland or
French Alps. So probably places like Teens, slightly higher, nice high resort. Usually pretty good for snow. There's about 1 metre of snow there at the moment.
Oh, wow.
And there's plenty of runs to ski. So
have you just been away recently?
Yeah, quite recently. Yeah, I went a little break away.
Nice. That was your first holiday since lockdown, I think you said.
It was my first holiday since
That's
lockdown.
a long time.
And it felt like a long time. But yeah, my energy is back up to where it should be, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
Excellent. So, day of recording today is a Friday. So you're driving home tonight on your long trip back, and you think, I'm going to have a takeaway tonight, I'm going to treat myself.
Yeah.
What's your go-to? What would you...
It's got to be fish and chips all day
Fish
long.
and chips.
Yeah, with a little bit of curry sauce on the side.
Nice.
Yeah, that's my favourite.
Excellent. I like fish and chips. I do like fish and chips, I must say. So skiing's a pastime of yours. What other ways do you like to unwind away from work?
Anything outdoors, really. My wife is a dog lover. She's a former RAF police dog handler, so that she's just carried that on. So we have 3 dogs in the house. So she'll walk those dogs regularly. We live in the countryside. We live in a little village, so we've got the great outdoors. And I like being outdoors when I can. But I've got to be honest, running businesses, I find that you inadvertently become tied to the desk, and before you know it, a day will roll over into the next day, and before you know it, a whole week's gone, and you haven't really been outside.
What dogs have you got?
We have a Belgian Shepherd. She's not a Belgian Shepherd, she's a Dutch herder, actually. We've got a Rottweiler Shepherd cross called Teddy, and we've got a little teacup terrier.
Wow. I bet that one's the boss of all the...
He is the boss, yeah, absolutely. Little Potter.
Excellent. A favourite pastime or sport that you're into at all?
I used to be quite an avid rugby player, but since leaving the army, I've just been so engrossed in other activities. And to be honest with you, I do miss playing rugby, but now there's that whole issue of if I get injured, I'm not really covered by, you know, if I'm off from work, I'm not getting paid. So I've got to think about that quite carefully. But I do really I used to enjoy rugby a lot.
Is that union?
Union, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. But what position were you?
What position do you think I was?
I'm going to guess one of the forwards.
I was one of the forwards. My preferred position was Lucette Prop.
What number's that?
So that's number 3.
Number 3?
Yeah.
I was going to say number 3 as well.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. What's your go-to streaming service? Netflix, Amazon?
Yeah, Netflix, Amazon. Yeah, I've been watching a few things on Amazon recently. A couple of cool programs which I've really enjoyed. So I'm watching Yellowstone at the moment, and I've watched the series before that, 1883, which I thought was pretty moving, but pretty cool. I like the whole cowboy environment as well.
I've been meaning to watch Yellowstone. That's one that's been flicking up there for quite a while.
Yeah, it's been pretty good.
I've never watched that.
Yeah.
I think we're waiting for the next Squid Games, aren't we?
Definitely. The real one, not the...
The alternative one with the real people. And Sunday dinner,
sure.
What's your roast of choice?
Yeah.
And what are you dipping your roast potatoes in?
Well, I'm not overly fussy about the roast, although I'm not a fan of lamb. Lamb's a bit greasy for me, so I do like pork. I love a bit of chicken, and my wife loves a bit of beef, so we'll often have a beef roast and gravy all day long. And no, I do not put mint sauce over all of my stuff.
Shout out, Paul. We're not the only ones that think that it's horrendous. Touching on your work background, Carl, you've got quite the lengthy CV.
Yeah.
So jump in if I'm incorrect on any of these, but you had 25 years armed service and SAS, and then one of your final jobs with the armed services was as an instructor with the MOD, and then you came out into the wide world of security. So you've done a couple of years with Hanover Associates as a project coordinator, 5 years as a consultant with SOS Security and MTG Consultancy, 6 years with Praetorian Services, 10 years, still counting, with Canary Wharf as a consultant, a directorship with Silverback Security Academy, and Dakin Consulting, which kicked off in 2014. As well as 6 years as a member of the board with the Security Insitute. I think I've covered everything there.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty good going. So a lot of those organisations you mentioned, they all cross over. So as a consultant, I've worked for a number of different consulting organisations at the same time. And what I'll do as a consultant, I will work under their brand. So Hanover Associates, for example, they were fortunate to win a project with the EU, and we developed a project that looked at terrorist attacks to hospitals across EU 28 as it was at the time, now down to 27. We developed a model for business resilience, which was tested at Ospedale San Raffaele in Milan. So that was a really interesting project. So it was a multinational project. We worked with lots of different people, and that really was one of the stepping stones for me leaving the military. As I stepped out of the army, that was one of my first jobs that I did alongside other things.
Mm-hmm. When was it that you left the military?
2013.
Was that like quite a natural step for ex-servicemen at the time to go into like security in whatever guise that was?
Well, if I'm being honest with you, when in my last 2 years in the army, I thought about, do I leave or do I stay? And there was still plenty of work for me to stay, and I was offered a role to stay in the army, but I decided that I'd had a great time, and I did have a great time. For me, it was a natural step for me to move into something in the commercial world. I wasn't entirely sure what that was going to be, if I'm really honest. What I did know is I didn't want to go on to what a lot of my colleagues call the circuit, which is often in the hostile environments, the more austere and challenging parts of the world. I didn't want to go into that because I'd spent a lot of time doing that anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to really learn a little bit about corporate security and the commercial world in the nicer places of the world, like London, for example. So that's kind of what I did. What my first real job really was executive protection, close protection. I worked with a couple of clients. I had some really cool clients, but I found that the work was very ad hoc. Mm-hmm. So unless you're fortunate to get a job with a particular client and family that will keep you busy 24/7, and they're quite few and far between, quite frankly. Or you're working in the live events industry and you're working with artists, which again is quite a demanding role. It's not the sort of thing I wanted to do, so I looked a little bit further afield, and I do what I do now.
Mm-hmm. So for anyone listening who doesn't really know what a consultant in security does, how would you kind of wrap that up?
Yeah, so a consultant is someone that's supposed to be a specialist in a given area. And I would caveat my consultancy title as I don't consider myself to be a specialist but a generalist. So I will, my area of knowledge, notice I didn't say expertise there because I don't consider myself an expert. I'm just someone with current and up-to-date knowledge and industry know-how, and I will advise, guide and support clients in getting things done. So the areas that I work across at the moment, I do work in corporate. I'm working with a client that has a very large facility in East London, high-rise facilities, over 120,000 people that migrate onto and off of that estate daily, and it's growing. They've just recently expanded to include residential within their estate. So it's and they like to talk about a place where you can work, rest, and play. And I think. Most people that know me will know exactly where that is. That's exactly what you can do on that estate. It's a really cool place to be. And interestingly, that was my first big job since leaving the military, and I was very lucky that actually working for that organisation taught me the basics of corporate security. So I'm hugely grateful for Matt Mayer, who was my governor down there. He's been an awesome mentor, quite frankly, and continues to be, and has really guided me in a really cool way that's enabling me to just expand spread my wings into other areas.
That's interesting what you say about still having a mentor. So you've got over 30 years working experience, whether that's in military or security consulting or kind of on the front line. CPD is something that's often quite overlooked. Fun fact we were talking before about yourself is you've got more letters after your name than actual letters in your name. If you could just explain to us what those acronyms after your name all mean and what they all stand for.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a Queen's Gantry Medal, so QGM. So that's an award that was presented to me by Her Majesty the Queen.
Really?
God bless her. Yeah. So I was, and that was for something I did during my service. So that's just an award. That's just an award for service. And then I am a chartered security professional. So I consider being chartered to be pretty much at the top of the pyramid in terms of being current and having been assessed by a group of my peers. So I'm very proud of that, and that's one of the reasons why I have now put my hat in the ring. I believe in putting your money where your mouth is, and I'm now one of the deputy registrars of the register because I want to give something back and help others to achieve the same thing and maintain the quality of the register. Mm-hmm. So that's what.
So would that be you like assessing people who are going through the CSyP?
Yeah. So
process?
I have been an assessor. I don't assess them now because I'm now one of the deputy registrars, so I'm now a moderator or an invigilator, if you like. So part of my role is to work under the registrar's directive, a guy called Mike Bluestone, to make sure that the assessors are applying the right level of diligence and rigour to the assessment process and making sure that their judgments are fair and valid, and that's pretty much what we do. And I think that works really well so far. We just had a big review. So it's not something that stays static for long, and we're always looking for, going back to my military sort of thinking, in the words of David Sterling, it's the endless pursuit of excellence. We're always looking to do things better if we can, so that doesn't stay static for very long. Other letters after my name, I'm a fellow of the Security Insitute, so that means that so anyone can join the Institute, and you will hit, subject to, when you fill in the application form, it's not a question of just filling it in and paying your money and therefore you're in. You will go through, again, a review by a group of peers. All right, so we've got that process in place, and you will be awarded a certain number of points against a set number. There's a number of criteria. I think there's 5 in total. And subject to what that looks like, you will then either be awarded an associate membership or you'll get a membership. Once you've been in the Institute for a little while and you've demonstrated and proven your continuing professional development, and there's a number of other things that you can then be re-evaluated and become a fellow. So the thing about being a fellow and or a chartered security professional is you are mandated to undertake continuing professional development on a yearly basis. Mm-hmm. Everyone below that, it's a voluntary thing, but we encourage them to do that because it's a good thing to do.
So CPD, what would that mean to you?
So I think CPD, so continuing professional development, and the clue's in the first word. It's continuing. It doesn't stop. So it's about doing something little and often. So it might be reading an article in a magazine that's just making you aware of a topic that you're interested in, something like, I don't know, facial recognition or AI or something like that. And it's just something that you do. It's a light touch, and you do it all the time. You don't have to do it every day, but you do it regularly. Mm-hmm. You might sit and listen to a webinar, for example. You might be involved in a webinar. What we're doing now, this is CPD. Mentoring, so mentoring others or being mentored, that's all part of CPD. But of course, formal training programs or formal education programs, they're also CPD. So it's a real mix of things that just enable you to be current and be bang up to date in your own given area of knowledge, but also be aware of what's going on left and right of you as well.
So I suppose to kind of do what you do for a living, which many hats, but the consultancy thing primarily, CPD's obviously got to form a big part of that.
Yes.
For someone, say like myself, I don't have degrees or anything like that, but using me as an example, if I wanted to kind of start the journey to become a chartered security professional, where would you recommend would be good starting blocks and starting points to get on that road?
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of time in the saddle first. So you'll need to choose which area interests you most. So for me, I've got quite a wide spectrum of areas that I'm interested in. So you mentioned SOS Security, which is over in Norway. Well, they specialise in events, so live events. So I'm really interested in live events, and I do work with a global music promotion company that specialise in exactly that. So I'm really interested in understanding crowd science, how to manage crowds, and all of the things that go on behind the scenes that enable an event to take place. But I'm not a specialist in it by far. I'm very interested in all aspects of countering terrorism in the commercial sense. So thinking about the whole risk management framework that needs to be put in place, how we are able to put physical and procedural measures in place to mitigate those particular risks. That's an area of real interest to me, and I think carries across all of the different areas that I'm interested in. I'm now doing a little bit of security officer service providing as well for a particular client in London. So I've actually got 12 employees now, which is really scary because they're I'm responsible for their ability to make a living, so payroll, pensions, and all of that stuff.
When did you set that up?
I set that up right in the middle of lockdown, actually, at the request of a particular client. And there was a number of challenges in setting up a new business in the middle of lockdown. One of them, as I might have mentioned earlier, was you can't register a business until you have a bank account for it. So there was a bit of a chicken and egg situation, and the banks weren't talking to people at that time. But we succeeded. I got an awesome business advisor, lives in Hull actually, in Thorntonwold. He kept me on the straight and narrow and really helped me catapult that business into being, and that's going well, touch wood. So the client seems to be happy, my team are happy, and I'm happy, so I'm enjoying that. But going back to your question about how to become a consultant, I think there's absolutely no harm in thinking about gaining an academic qualification. It's a really scary thing for many of us, because I know a huge number of people in the industry that left school with not a great deal. I was one of them. But as you grow in maturity and you get a few years, start to accumulate under your belt, your view of the world changes, and your ability to assimilate information changes as well. Your interest in the topic changes as well. You're motivated in a different way. When you're at school, you gaze out the window, you want to be somewhere else. But when you're in business and you're in the working environment, your motivation is completely different. So I would always encourage folk to think about an academic qualification, a degree, because what that gives you is the ability to think critically. All right, and I think that's really important, particularly if you end up in business, or you end up in yours and Alan's positions where you're at a director level within an organisation. That critical thinking is super important and is good grounding. It just changes the way that you write and you articulate your thinking in the verbal and the written word. So that's worth doing, but it isn't the be all and end all. I think experience is absolutely key and fundamental. You can't be a consultant unless you have the experience. And if I'm being really honest with you, when I set out as a consultant, I didn't have the experience. But I was lucky that I found an awesome client who took me on at face value, and they helped shape me to what I am. So I just, I spent that time working with them and learning the basics. I also had a good guy out in Norway, SOS Security, John Jacobson, and I learnt the fundamentals of event management through being John's apprentice, really, for about 4 years. For about 4 years, I spent a lot of springs and summers out in Norway doing different types of events, where he showed me the ropes, and I still do stuff with John now. So I'm really grateful for that.
What's the security landscape like in Norway? How is it viewed? Because it's something we were talking about off camera. That one of the problems that we find getting people kind of into the industry is there is a bit of a perception that it's low skill, low paid, and there are a number of people, organisations and voices that are trying to change that perception. But obviously it's a slow-moving part. What's it like in Norway? How is security viewed over there?
Very similar to the UK. Well, I mean, I've worked in Norway, I've worked in the States, I've worked in Bali, I've worked in Morocco, I've worked in a number of other places, Hong Kong, and I can tell you now that the issues that security officers have here in the UK are the same elsewhere in the world, about this whole perception of being low-skilled and low-paid. Yes, they're low-paid, invariably. No, they're not low-skilled. We were talking earlier on about the soft skills to security. The fact that when something goes wrong in the working environment, I don't know, there's a medical emergency, for example, or something more sinister, everybody will turn to the security team and look for them for help. So I think that it's a real shame that the general population views security officers, and notice I didn't say guards, they're not guards, they're security officers, as being low-skilled.
There's no bit of conversation about that.
Yeah, you've listened to our previous episode.
If you look at the Kerslake review following the Manchester Arena attack, and then look at what Saunders said thereafter during the inquiry, security officers are part of the first response. So arguably they're zero responders, they're right there and they respond immediately, but they're part of that initial response, which is one of the reasons why I also encourage security officers to understand what CSyP means, so the Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Protocols. And that's important. They're very, very basic, but that's important to understand how to communicate with the blue light emergency services when they turn up on scene, so you can engender that trust and that relationship straight away from the get-go and remain part of that response. So that's really important. So I highly value security officers.
I think the inception from the SIA when that started, we all hoped it would professionalise the industry. And it has, but I think it's still a long way to go. What's your thoughts in that?
It's an interesting point, Alan. I think, and testament to that was, as we went into lockdown for the pandemic, security officers were not part of that group of workers, key workers. And it took, and this is, I'm an advocate of the SIA, but I would say that the SIA at that point really missed a point where they were focused on other things. It took a little while for them to lobby the Home Office in order to get security officers recognised as key workers. Yeah. And interestingly, a number of my clients were using the security officers were the only people on site, and therefore they were the people that were checking that the building management systems were still doing what we expected them to do. If there was a leak, they were the ones that were responding to the leak. If the server rooms, they were making sure that the temperatures would be maintained within the server rooms, and so on and so forth. So, and even now, post-pandemic, security officers in a lot of my client sites are relied on quite heavily out of hours and at the weekends.
It's interesting, really, because a lot of key national infrastructure sites, the first line of defence is security. You go to a power plant or to water treatment or anything like that. We're always the first ones.
Yeah. I think as well, sort of like through the pandemic, the security officers were on the site all the time, and the clients gave them a lot more responsibility, and they've evolved and they've kept that going. And I think it's made more of an important resource within any organisation.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's just developed and it will continue to develop as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Alan, 100%. But and what I would say to security officers or professional security practitioners, irrespective of what level or grade you're at within the industry, think about the things that you can do to make yourself more valuable. So think about health and safety at work, for example. So go and get yourself a recognised qualification in managing health and safety at work. So you can just be safe on site, you can ensure that your team is safe on site, and all of those good things. They're the basics. And I think a lot of that has come out of the pandemic.
CPD, it's like you say, it's continued, isn't it? It's never ending. One of the ways in which that can be rubber stamped effectively would be the Security Institute, which is a nice little segue onto the Insitute. To anyone who's watching or listening who doesn't know what the Security Institute is, give us a little flavour of what.
Sure. What that is. I'm very biased because I'm a member of the Security Institute. I'm actually a fellow, and I'm also an active member on the board of directors. And that's not me sort of telling you how awesome I am. That's me just saying that I'm trying to give a little bit of something back to the industry, and I really mean that. The Security Insitute is a industry recognised professional body. It's quite a young organisation actually. They're only I think they've just come up to their 25 year anniversary. So quite new in the bigger scheme of things. There are other recognised organisations such as ASIS, who are also a really good organisation in as well. And there are others. So if you're a security consultant, for example, you might decide to join the Association of Security Consultants. But the Security Institute for me is a good place to be if you're a generalist, and we cover a lot of different sectors within the industry. In terms of rubber stamping your CPD, we have a mechanism where you can demonstrate your CPD, so you can collect it. We're about to launch our new digital platform, which has been a long time coming, but previously we had an app and the website where you could do it on the app, which made it really easy. At the moment, we're asking our members to do it in old-fashioned way at the moment and submit that in a paper form. That won't be for long. We'll soon be back to a digital methodology, so you can do that really quickly and and it just happens. What you'll get once your CPD has been verified, and you've only got to collect 36 points a year, well, that can be done inside a week. But we ask you to spread it out across perhaps 6 months of the year and vary the different types of CPD activities, so it's a real mix. And that's what I do personally. You then submit that information, that will then be verified, and then you'll be issued with a certificate. And that certificate is evidence that you've done your CPD for the year. What you'll also get is a green tick with the date on it. You can put that on your name block underneath your name on your emails, and that's what I do.
So we're just going to take a break now, and we're actually going to split this episode into 2 parts due to the length of the conversation that we're now having. So this is the end of part 1. Join us again very soon for part 2.